Hey, what's up, community of faith? My name is Paul, and welcome back to the COF podcast. I'm actually joined by a new co-host today.
Yes, I'm Cherie. Hi, guys.
She was apparently
glad to be here.
Waiting for me to introduce her.
I didn't know you were going to introduce me. I feel special.
Well, Cherie, you are special.
Thanks, Paul.
And our audience
Appreciate
loves you. And we have some special guests with us today from My Refuge House. We have Heather, who's here, and we also have Roseanne. And we're really excited and thankful that y'all are joining us today.
Thank you.
So they've been at church with us this past weekend, but there are some people that maybe didn't see our services and are going to kind of want to know what My Refuge House is all about. So maybe give us a little bit of backstory. What is My Refuge House and what's happening there?
Great. Well, My Refuge House is a residential therapeutic home in the Philippines for people who have been rescued from sex trafficking. So we have a residential campus, a shelter for girls who are needing active long-term care. We provide all of the supports. And then over the years, we have also expanded and kind of deepened our work to do more family care and prevention work.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And maybe talk to us a little bit about your roles in the organization so that our audience can kind of get to know you as well.
Sure. I'll go and then you. So I'm the creative, energetic organizer, or CEO.
Nice.
That's resonates with me.
See, I love
it's
that.
way better than the traditional titling.
Love it.
And it fits much more with So I'm in the United States. I live in California, and I work with our staff who are there, and then we have a part-time person in the United States who's actually just up in Dallas. I like to say we're small but mighty, and I wear all of the hats that try to kind of connect us all.
There
together.
you go. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. And yes, I am the director of program operations. I'm Cebu based. I kind of like provide oversight to the day-to-day operations. But I always tell people that my job is to actually like make sure that I provide enough support to the staff so that they can continue doing what they love to do, which is taking care of the girls. So, yeah.
I love that. Right. Well, Community of Faith has partnered with you all for quite a while.
I think before both of our time.
Okay, you guys have been around 15 years.
Yeah.
You've just
My Refuge
celebrated
House
that.
has just celebrated our 15th anniversary.
Okay.
I've been around for 8 years, and Roseanne for
Going on 13.
13. Wow. And so how long has Community of Faith been partnered with you?
I think at
14.
least 14.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like the whole time.
Basically.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I think you guys were.
We were an infant then.
I'm not even sure we had a full house built. I think you helped us build our first.
Well, so Paul and I were talking before we got to meet with you guys, and neither one of us knew the answer to this, and I have been so curious. How does this even start? How does an organization like this come? Who breathed this up, dreamed this up, saw the need? I mean, you're here in California or in the U.S.
Yeah.
And like, how does this get birthed?
Yeah, well, only God, right?
Right.
I think so. There's a small church in Southern California, and by small I mean 100 people.
Right.
And they primarily worked, like they had families, but they also had a larger college population, so they were kind of transient and moving and growing. So they were shifting a lot. Mm-hmm. But they had a social justice Bible study that was happening. And they were reading this book, and in that book, it was talking about how there were girls around the world who were being trafficked, and laws were actually there to protect them, but there was nowhere for them to go, so they weren't being rescued.
Okay.
And so there was the will to rescue, there was the will to protect, but just not anywhere for them to go. Mm-hmm. And they were just kind of rocked by that, and in that moment, I think very, very quickly they decided that, hey, we've been saving our money for a while. They had, I think, $30,000 saved, which will not get you very far in Southern California to build your own building.
Sure.
And they, I think, hit the point where why would we build a building that we would use as a home for part of the week when we could give that money to build a home that would literally save lives? So they reached out to the organization that wrote the book, and they said, we're going to give you this money. That organization said, we actually don't do that, but we'll help you do that. And where we really need you is the Philippines. And what they didn't know is that the pastor and half the congregation all identify as Filipino American.
Really?
Wow.
And so that congregation basically was, well, clearly this is what we're supposed to be doing.
That really is a God thing.
Yeah. No, My Refuge House kind of landed in my lap, and I thought I was very special for about 2 weeks
Yeah.
until I realized that we all have this story of kind of coming to this place and realizing, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be.
So the Philippines is recognized as a hub for
Trafficking.
a lot of trafficking, like more so than other
Yeah.
places in the world.
Yeah, because we speak decent English in the Philippines, so it's easier for foreigners to actually reach out and talk to minors, and like even like those who are in the poverty threshold, because we can communicate well. So,
How do they typically reach out? Is it online?
yeah, online.
Okay.
Especially during the pandemic, where almost all the children or like young adults like have access to internet.
Okay.
So how do these girls get out of their current situation and then make their way to you?
To My Refuge House?
Yeah.
Yeah, most of them are rescued, or I think all of them are rescued by the authorities.
Okay.
And they're referred to a social
Social
yeah.
welfare, child protective services. It's very similar to what happens in the United
Here.
States,
Okay.
where law enforcement or child protective services learns that there's something going on. Maybe they do some investigation to try to figure out, and then they go in and remove the child from harm.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they will go to a state shelter or a state facility. And then from there, we have relationships with state social workers who know kind of who tends to thrive on our campus. And then
Okay.
they reach out and they get referred to us.
Girls enter your program, and then what does their process look like? Is it individualized? Do you kind of have set programming that the girls then go through to,
Acclimate and all
get
that,
to
yeah.
get back to a place where they can get out on their own again, or what does that look like?
Maybe even start with how.
Yeah. So like when these girls were arrested or like abused or exploited or any types of abuse, like your voice were taken away from you to decide for yourself, right? So you were shut down to speak up for yourself. And so in our program and with MRH, what we do is we want to bring back and give back that voice to the child. So what we do is when they are referred to us by the government, we want the girls to be the one to decide if they want to be with MRH or not. Because we want them to realize that they have their voice, that it's actually a powerful voice for them to decide for themselves. So we don't accept girls who are not willing to stay with us, because we want it to be an informed decision.
Okay.
And because we believe that restoration and healing must be a mutual relationship, and it should be a mutual decision between the worker and also the client. And so that's what we do. That's the very beginning of our process. And then once the girl would say like, I want to be part of My Refuge House, then we accept her, and then we provide like all types of services.
Healthcare,
Yeah, healthcare, education, livelihood, spiritual formation, and discipleship. And so yeah.
And so there will be some of those programs are obviously kind of more uniform, but we also work with each girl individually to identify who is the family that we're going to be working with, who beyond these walls, because the goal is not to keep you here. The goal is to be able to have you back out there. So how can we help make that a safer place to go to? And then education-wise, they're all over the spectrum. So we have, one of the things that makes us kind of unique is that we have an accredited homeschooling program.
Wow.
And our teachers, I've been meaning to ask our lead they must be so proud, because we currently have 7 girls in college. So, and most of them are doing, that like college, they sometimes hit a moment where they're like, oh, what am I doing?
Right.
But we're having college graduates now. And I feel like our teachers just must be so proud that
amazing,
they're preparing them.
Sure.
And so we'll start with kind of an assessment, figuring out where are you educationally? How are we, working with you tailored in that way.
Speaking of, what are the ages? What age are you eligible to come into the program, and then what age are you supposed to matriculate out?
Technically, we want to accept girls who are as young as 8 up to like maybe 18. But there are also cases where girls are older than 18. Just like 3 months ago, we accepted a 21-year-old, or maybe like she's 22 now. No read, no write. So she doesn't know how to read and write. And so by program, like we don't actually, like we're allowed to accept her. But we said like, this girl needs help. Like no one's going to accept her. So we
Developmentally, she still needs to, right.
She was telling the state social workers that the one thing she really wanted to do was learn how to read and write. And they just couldn't think of another shelter that would maybe be willing and able to do that for an adult.
Sure.
And so they reached out to us, and we spent probably 30 minutes
talking about individualization. Like, we started, like, we have girls who are 8 or 13 but can read and write, but this girl, she doesn't know anything, and so we did with phonics, with alphabet, with numbers, with vowels. It was so difficult, but now she can read.
That's amazing.
And she
awesome.
can write.
That is amazing.
I guess I'm kind of curious. I mean, obviously, you are pulling these girls out of very dangerous situations. Like, as an organization, how are you viewed in the Philippines? Like, is it pretty dangerous? Because, I mean, obviously, by pulling these girls out, that's hitting,
Are they property to someone?
Yeah, I guess that's my question.
Are they in danger?
I guess I'm not phrasing it correctly, but is there a danger in what you're? I mean, I'm sure there's some kind of risk there, or.
Yeah, so I think. It's very easy to kind of think and there are certainly like criminal elements at different points in time, but most of our girls, similar to the United States, most of the girls have actually been exploited by someone who's close to them. Wow. And so in the way that we are kind of reaching out to their families to work with their families, I think, and we do that. I've been really impressed with our team with the love and the care that they kind of approach the family in a way that says, look, what has happened to the child is completely wrong, and the direct perpetrator is often imprisoned, and so harm's way is not immediate.
So the girls are kind of still connected to their families.
Yeah, and that's a very Filipino cultural thing that we have worked really hard to.
Yeah, and I think the misperception about trafficking is that it's a syndicated, organized crime.
And I think that's where my mind immediately went.
Mine too.
So I do understand that. But in the Philippines, where poverty is so rampant, most of those who have facilitated these crimes are actually people who are very close to them. Parents, siblings, relatives, friends, even girlfriends or boyfriends, So these are very close to them, and so but we also value the culture of Filipino, whereas that it is more of really valuing the role of the family in our culture, and so we don't want to be the reason to have that disconnection. So instead of separating them, we want them to be connected through reunification and reconciliation as well.
Wow, that's incredible.
And for us, that is, Roseanne does a great job of talking about that being a Christ-like presence, right?
Yeah.
That Christ didn't separate people.
Right.
And so by being present, and I always say that accountability, true accountability and restoration comes from a place of love, where you really do see someone bigger and more valuable and more, we're singing about being worthy this morning, right? That everyone has worth,
right.
And we need to see every person as beloved. Right. And sometimes it's out of that sense of you are beloved and you are not acting in a way that is displaying your belovedness, and we can hold you accountable to that. But I think the families often, it is often with great effort. There was one family that we worked with for several years before they really trusted us. But I think we kind of are persistent with pursuing them from a place of love.
Right. So they're obviously, you said there's education services, and obviously they're given a shelter and food and all of that, but there's a counseling therapeutic part of it as well. Because there's so much trauma that they've experienced.
So we have our own external counselor who goes to the house every Saturday.
Right.
So she does individual counseling and also group counseling.
Okay.
Is there a spiritual element to it? Is there is that kind of a roadblock with some of these families? Is that a difficult thing that, hey, this is kind of a Christian organization, and so is that where some of the barrier comes from?
Honestly, like we are a faith-based organization, but we wanna share the love of Christ through the community. And so like the 22-year-old I was talking about, she's actually a Muslim. And
Wow.
so we accepted her. And like we even like I was even the one who said like we will find you a Quran because we want you to also exercise your own faith. And if one day through your exposure to this community you want to be a Christian, then that's actually a good news, right? But for now, we want to meet her where she's at. And if that means like supporting her own faith and later, but it is also through our organization that she can find Christ in the process, then that would be good.
Right.
So we want to embrace everyone. And we have even like girls, like for example, I'm going to, like most of the girls did not see a Bible before they came to our shelter. They did not know who God is. Like they know there's God, but they don't know who Jesus Christ is. And then I met this, if you are in this work, you tend to be very prideful at some point because you're trying to save and help people and help girls who are hurting and broken. And then on my 3rd month with MRH, I was so prideful when I was like, just being so like, I don't call it proud of what you're doing. And then one day I met with Hope, like one of our girls before, like I was 3 months old into the job. And she asked me one time that if God is really real. Mm-hmm. And of course, being prideful, I said, of course, he is. Mm-hmm. And then he said, so where was he when my stepfather was abusing me? Mm-hmm. And I was just so humbled by God and said, like, Roseanne, it's not about you. It's actually like really letting this girl see Jesus. Maybe like during the moment of those abuses, she felt that God wasn't there. But it's also our opportunity to actually like show her that God is really real through the community that we provide for her.
Wow.
And I'll say, I got a secular degree, but at a seminary. So lots of theology and wrapped up into, counseling and all of that. In my first trip to the Philippines, we had a spiritual retreat, and one of the 14-year-old girls is asking the pastor who's leading the retreat, like questions that I didn't hear anybody ask until seminary. And what I love when the young woman that Roseanne was talking about who didn't read or write and who's Muslim, kind of parallel to some of her trafficking is related to the Muslim faith. Mm-hmm. And so what part of her healing has been trying to figure out what of me was trafficked because of kind of a distorted view of faith, or what was just trying to make sense of that. So she wanted to understand, what does it really mean to be Muslim? Right. And so she's asking these deep questions about, what does my God think about this? And then so some of our other girls started to say, well, wait, if that's what Muslims think, then what do Christians think? Mm-hmm. And so these like beautiful dialogues around faith. And like, I think it really kind of started to sharpen the faith of some of the other girls and some of our staff. Like it makes you dig deep.
Process it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's not this superficial thing. Mark was saying today, go down to the bottom floor on the elevator and see what's underneath. Right. And I feel like that really has
if you've never been to our shelter at and so we have a very tall wall, so tall, and so at the very beginning of our work, the girls felt that they were in prison because of that, and so we tried our very best to actually make them feel more human, and children. And so every Sunday we allow the girls to go to church and attend actual service and be with the community of God. And then they will join the praise and worship team. We also have our own praise and worship team inside the shelter. We have daily devotions every morning, and we also partner with a church that goes to the shelter and disciple the girls every Wednesday afternoon. So and they're really reading the Bible and understanding the salvation and the meaning of the cross. So kind of stuff.
I love that too, because the pastor that is doing this, there are actually a few other churches of the same church around Cebu, so that when the idea again being like, what will life beyond our walls? We don't want your faith to just be nurtured here. We want you to know that there's something more that you can do out there. Mm-hmm.
Let me ask this. So, there may be people that are listening that are saying, hey, I have a heart to do something in missions, and maybe even rescuing girls, maybe that's resonating with them. I'm just curious from your all's standpoint, what was the deciding factor that says, man, this is something that God's called me to? I want to give my life to helping these girls and being a part of this organization? Because to me, that's a huge leap of faith, just like whether it's pastoring or something else, because I can't imagine the heaviness that comes along with working with these girls. I would assume there is an attachment that even you all get with them. And so to me, that has to be calling, because when it gets tough, I assume you can't just say, oh, I'm done for a while and I'll come back when I feel like it. And so I'm just curious, from your all's personal story, what was that decision that says, man, this is what God's called me to do? And then how were you able to take that step of faith to say, hey, I'm going to jump in?
Yeah, that's right.
You go.
Yeah, my personal story. Anyway, sometimes the very beginning, I said, I'm going to join the My Refuge House because I want to save the girls. I'm going to help save the girls. But I ended up actually saving myself in the process.
Wow.
So whenever this job is very emotionally investing, you pour your heart out into it. It's no easy job. I know I have no money to actually do something for the work, but I know I have the heart to actually do it. And so I said, I'm gonna use that heart. I'm a social worker by profession, and so I said I'm gonna use my talent and my gift to help these girls. And then whenever I feel so tired because of this work, I always go back to that 3-month-old Rosan at MRH, where I have the obligation to make these children feel that God is real. Yes, it's no easy. I'm not gonna it is not everyone's calling. But as a Christian woman, I always remind myself that love is an action word,
Right.
and love works through faith.
I like that.
Right. And the
That's okay.
and the work of trafficking is such a massive mission to do, and My Refuge House is not the only ministry who's doing it. But for me, in just small steps, we know we're doing an impact. And so for me, if I am given the platform to actually, use my faith by showing that love, and even if sometimes I doubt if we're gonna address trafficking, but I know that if I share my love and I also share my faith through the work I do, then it is something that we can tell the world that everything is possible.
Yeah.
And I was talking this morning, and I said that we usually see trauma and abuse as messy and very complex work, but sometimes these girls would tell us that their mess can be a message as well to people, and
Wow.
that message would be that they are so much more capable of doing more, that there are so much potentials in their stories. And these girls came to us broken and hurt and in pain, because sometimes they are so overwhelmed with their stories of abuse, and it is our duty to remind them that your story is so much bigger than your abuse, and your God is so much bigger than your trauma, right? So for me, that's the reason why I feel instead of me hoping to save the girls, I also ended up being saved in the process, because it reminded me of my faith. It reminded me of what my calling is. And it's just about calling. It's really having that intention to be with the people, just like what Jesus did when he came into the world and saved, because he was a normal human being. And all of us, we are all normal, and I know that being normal doesn't limit us from doing more. And yeah, I think that's my personal impact.
It's powerful.
Yeah. That's why I wanted her to go first. Although maybe I should have gone first and
Right.
let her follow. I was born with a deep well of hope. And I think the most frustrated I can ever get is if somebody feels sorry for our girls. Because I'm they're the most powerful people. They've made it through something and still have hope to do something else. And so don't feel sorry for them. Provide them a platform to do what they can do. And I think in the United States, my coworker Kim and I talk a lot about how our work in the U.S. parallels our work with the girls. And that when we're meeting with supporters and donors and partners in the United States, we want to meet people where they are, and we want to help them to see that their gifting and what they can do and how they can show up is so much more than what they think.
Yeah.
And that's attached to something bigger and to a community. And through that, they can kind of find who they are. And My Refuge House might not be their thing, but we know there's something that's their thing. And so if by listening to us speak passionately about it, then it'll spark, because there's plenty in the world that needs attention, right? And so I think for me, when I became a therapist, it really was this idea of I'm always scanning the margins, like who's not involved in this conversation, who needs to be here, what voices, what information do we not have that we can bring in and build with that. And for me, I've always had just kind of a heart for kids and for women. And so it's mine is not necessarily a trafficking specific, but it's more of like a women and girls and kind of a more kind of global specific, if you can.
No, that's great.
That, yeah.
I was curious how many girls you house or you take in, like at any given time, and then how do you know when it's when the success has occurred? Like it's time for them to move off of the.
Yeah, it's time.
What do we call it? We don't call it a campus, the shelter. It's time for them to move on. Like they're now strong and ready to go and all of that.
Yeah, the way we do it is we try to be as comprehensive as possible. But when we're sending girls home, we have 4 areas that we need to measure. One is family readiness, their therapy, their legal cases, and also their education. So those are 4 major areas we measure. But when it comes to success, it's a pretty tricky question because we see the girls individually and they have their individual capacity. So when we seek success among these girls, we wanna see them in a much individualized manner. So for example, we have girls who went to college. They're the very first college graduate in their generation, and that's very impactful. Became a social worker and now doing a professional work. But we also have girls who got pregnant at 16. And others may see it as something unsuccessful in the work we do, but as people who know them better and knowing how they were raised and how they were abused when they were a child, and now here they are at 16 being a teenage mom and becoming a responsible mother. That's also a success in our view. So yeah, but we don't just send girls home. We have family workers, we have community workers who are doing the work from the ground and making sure that we're sending the girls home in a much better and healthier place.
So there's sort of a transitional plan as you leave.
Well, and I would say just as much as when they come, it's a choice. When they leave is also, they are part of that choice. And we are making, and from day one, we have an eye toward what needs to happen in order for you to move beyond here.
Right.
One of the stories that I've been sharing is we had this young woman who moved on campus, and when I first met her, she was pretty new, and my timing of a visit happened to kind of coincide with her just arriving, and she did not speak. Her voice she was always just very quiet. You know, like she all of our girls pick a pseudonym, so that's kind of a naming that they do, and she had not done that, and it took her forever to choose her name, and she just was passive. And when I was there this past March, she was like vibrant and chatty and charming. And I was like, oh, like just the transformation is remarkable. And then so one of the things that we haven't really talked about is that we've extended some of our supports to uplift families so that the girls are not the only one, like we're kind of creating some culture of education at home. So siblings are getting scholarships. And so this young woman, 2 of her brothers are on scholarship with us. And so she went home, and in a very short period of time, her mother's boyfriend solicited her. And that's devastating. And of course we don't want that to happen. That is the opposite of anything that we want. But this girl who had once lost her voice said, like you will back up and you will not do this. And she found her voice. And unfortunately, her mother did not believe her, but her brother believed her, and they went to the authorities. Wow. And so that for me is like, it's a terribly messy situation. It is not
empowering.
Fun. But I don't worry about her because she found her voice and she found her allies and she figured out how to, She didn't just stop at one. Like she was persistent. And that for me gives me so much more hope for her over the next 10, 15 years than
Absolutely.
if, anything else.
Wow, that's amazing.
Well, I want to honor y'all's time because I know that you got to get out here, and I am so grateful and thankful that you spent some time talking to us. But I'm sure that some of the conversation we've had today, people are going to have more questions.
Yeah.
They want to keep up with what y'all are doing and everything that's happening at My Refuge House. Can you just give people maybe, whether it's social media or website, how can people find out more about what you're doing, how they can get involved, and just see the life change that's taking place at My Refuge House?
Great. And thank you, Community of Faith. You are definitely part of our family. And our website is myrefugehouse.org. Any social media is My Refuge House. And, our YouTube channel is My Refuge House Videos, I think. Okay. But if you send a message, it's me. So don't be thinking that you're like reaching out to some unknown person. It's me. And if the question is for Roseanne, I will forward that right along to her. And we're usually pretty good. We love comments, and it keeps us going. And our staff really do follow. Our alumni follow, and they see the comments, they see the encouragement, and it's impactful.
Awesome.
That's great.
Well, y'all are in our prayers. And again, thank you so much for joining us for this time. And thank you all for listening and joining us on the COF podcast. Keep it right here. Make sure you're liking and subscribing. We're going to be interviewing more of our missions partners as we enter into Best Gift season. So we appreciate you. We love you, church. And thank you, ladies, again.
Thank you.